remiss in not welcoming our viewers to
Oh,
our conversation. So whomever they might be, we welcome them. And I'm delighted to be able to speak to you today, Sister Laura Marie Smith, who's currently a resident in the Dominican Lives Center. And is it the second floor of Regina?
second floor of
Second floor,
Regina.
Regina. How many years has it been now since you've been a resident?
It's almost 3 years.
3 years.
Mhm.
Where were you before you came this way?
I was living in Chesterfield, Michigan, which is really New Baltimore for people who are from Michigan and want to know where is Chesterfield.
Yeah, yeah. And you're 87 now?
I'm 87 now.
And
my last birthday on November the 10th.
And what were you? I know you had retired before you came here, but did you do any volunteer work or?
Well, I had done. I suppose I had a little interim period of sickness, so a lot of things stopped. But subsequently, I was working in our development office in Detroit with Sister Adrian Schaefer, and it was a very, fruitful experience.
And you continue to do that today on
Yes,
campus?
yes, somewhat different, but basically the same. We're all working for the same direction.
Isn't it a privilege to call our donors?
Oh, that's a delight. They're always, it's pleasant, but it's also meaningful.
Yes. Am I correct in saying that we are both Buckeyes by birth?
Oh, we certainly are. And mine is an accident by birth. My mother's from Houston, and my father was from Marshfield, Wisconsin. And so he did, I don't know what he did, but they say, when you're little, you hear why we landed in Cleveland. But he had heard that they were the first in research, they were the first in education, and they were the first in several things. And at the time we talked, or at least they talked a lot about the fluoride in the water and how meaningful it was for health purposes. And also education was held in great high regard. So they thought this was the best place to be. Also, they were doing a great deal for, at that time, it's back in the Dark Ages, the polio. And they were one of the first who had done so much research, which was fruitful in their research. I know that.
And your father was involved in that?
Well, he wasn't. I don't think he was involved. He died when I was 9, so I don't remember exactly how it all played out. I just know that was the history.
So you were born in Cleveland?
I was born in Cleveland.
And what about siblings?
I have one sister who was a remarkable, beautiful young woman, and she was 13 months older than I was, but you would think it was 13 because she taught me to read. She taught me to do all the things that she had learned ahead of time. So it was a wonderful, wonderful family, I think.
And what was your baptismal name?
My baptismal name was Dolores.
Was that after an aunt or a grandmother? Or?
No, I don't know why my mother chose that.
Mm-hmm.
They liked the name.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my first name is Ruth. It's really Ruth Dolores, but I can't recall anybody ever calling me Ruth. It was mostly Dolores. I think there was a movie star at the time, now that I think of it. So it was Dolores Del Rio, I think. So.
Oh, I remember. Yeah. Did you have our sisters in school?
No, I never met our sisters at all until I had already graduated from high school. And I was on a trip with my grandparents to Florida. And we stopped, we were in Miami. We had been in Tampa, where my grandfather had relatives. And then we came to Miami to visit some friends. And I went to Mass one morning to St. Pat's in Miami Beach and met Monsignor Barry, and he there was a little flood. You know, they all had water sprinklers, and there was something wrong with the sprinklers. So I was taking a detour, and we talked about that. And then he asked, and then we talked, and he invited my grandmother and grandfather, you know, we went to Mass together. And then he introduced me to the sisters. And the first sister I met was Sister Aurelia. And she was absolutely lovely, charming. It was just a spiritual experience. And also, two of the most beautiful women I felt we ever saw. They were spiritually strong. They were academically outstanding. Sister right present, Kathleen Donnelly, and also Catherine Deutsch. Those were the two sisters that I met and that kind of took my grandmother and grandfather, and they took us around. The girls needed somebody to take them to Lagorce Country Club for a concert or something. So my granddaddy, he drove them. So it was kind of to get to know them on a very much more human scale. Our sister, I had the Notre Dame sisters, and the reason why is my father again had found that he felt that they were a German group of sisters who had come to this country. They were outstanding educators, and he wanted the best for his children. And they were outstanding, and I truthfully can only think, and I can remember every single thing about my first grade teacher. Probably most people can. But the Notre Dame sisters were outstanding. There was one interim period when I went to Ursuline, which was the Irish sisters, you know, and we all wondered why we weren't there instead of there. But it was meaningful for all of the family because they followed everything. And my grandmother and mother decided in high school what we would take in high school, not whatever the. At the time, I had no idea that there was a prescribed curriculum. We had to take what my grandmother and mother decided for us for education. It wasn't just something that you bought a package deal for.
So my question is, you're visiting Miami, then you come home.
Mm-hmm.
Then how do you connect with Adrian?
Well, Sister Aurelia said she had a very good friend who was in Cleveland. And she said, I said, oh, really? I didn't know there were any sisters in. I, at one time, we were in the parish, St. Thomas Aquinas. And St. Thomas Aquinas, a big statue in the front of church, but it was bronze. I didn't even know that they wore white. My grandmother and grandfather thought that the sisters were brilliant because they were wearing white. It would be too hot to wear black like the other sisters, which... if you went to school with them and sat beside somebody that was wearing black, it wasn't too much fun. But the idea was for me to meet Sister Lorena, and she was at the time, Sister Lorena was teaching at St. John Nepomucene, and which is on the other side of town, which I remember going with my grandfather taking me, and we went to meet her, because we talked on the phone, and my grandfather had talked with her as well. And we couldn't find the place. We didn't know where we were because it was really, at that time, far more of a ethnic area.
Yeah.
And so anyhow, we found her, and it was a history following me right from that very moment all the way up to entering.
Well, Lorena was a good one, Dad.
Oh, yes.
She was so much fun, wasn't she?
Oh, yes, and absolutely deeply spiritual. And the meeting was more real than... I'm not saying our sisters were not real, but there was a somewhat, I would say, a chasm between being secular and being religious. Whereas we never noticed that with Sister Lorena. We never noticed it with Sister Aurelia either. Sister Aurelia was absolutely lovely, and very charming hostess, at St. Pat's. So.
And then you received the name Laura Marie.
I asked for any form of Laura. I asked for Laura Ann, Laura Marie. My grandmother's name is Laura Ann, and my mother's name is Laura, and my father's name was William. So there, kind of a connection. So I wanted something with Laura, and I remember Sister Edmund saying, "Now I hope you won't be too disappointed. That's such a theatrical name." And I said, "Theatrical?" I said, "I never thought of it that way. How could it be?" And she said, "Well, just don't be disappointed." And I said, "Well, I would be disappointed because my grandmother and grandfather, everybody thought that was what it was going to be, some form of Laura." So anyhow, I wound up with something I wanted and something I enjoy. So Laura Marie.
Was it while you were a postulant or novice that you met Sister Bertha?
Oh, well, I was a postulant, and I was assigned to help her in some way over in the office as the registrar.
At Siena?
At Siena. And she was lovely. She also had, I think she said, a niece named Laura, and so we became very, very close. But she was wonderful. Sister Bertha was an extraordinary woman, and she worked tirelessly, and she had a mind that was as retentive for anything she ever heard. It was recorded, and she was a better computer than we have today, but she was a delight. Also, she used to have in her bottom drawer, she'd always have a box of Hershey bars. And I'm really I like candy, and I certainly eat candy, but I don't think I've spent $20 in my life on candy, where my sister could probably buy the Empire State Building. But it was such a delight. She'd always say, "Okay, take some candy and take 2-3 bars." Well, I was popular in the novitiate with the candy, especially when everybody seemed to be hungry at many times. So it was a very fulfilling thing, and I enjoyed working with her.
Is that background led you to work with Sister Cletus then when you were?
I don't know how any of it happened, but that again. Well, see, we had change in administration, and Sister Cletus had been appointed to be bursar general, and there again, there is no one who should be canonized. If anybody ever should be, it should be Sister. She would spend infinite time, if anyone made mistakes in their accounting, because each month sisters were to send in a stipend, and she would put it in such a gentle way that it was more of a greeting rather than get your money in on time. It was a lovely experience. And her best friend was Sister Ann Joachim. And Sister Ann Joachim, was a whirlwind. And she'd always be over at the office. And it really was a good thing. I enjoyed more than anything. I don't think I would have survived the novitiate if it hadn't been for Sister Ann Joachim and with Sister Cletus, who are, and I think everyone knows the contribution they have made to just bring about recognition that should have been forthcoming.
Do you remember, did each sister have to send in, each house have to send in so much per sister?
Yes, and it was all the same. So if let's say it was $10 a month. If you had 10 sisters, it was $100. But sometimes they would kind of there might be some error. But it wasn't anything too significant that anyone would. It's just that sister would have to call and make sure that it was reconciled, but always in a way that there was no feeling that you had made a mistake. You know how like someone would point out your errors. It was like, aha, you made a mistake. It wasn't like that. I'm kind of glad that I had this chance to talk to you, because we haven't talked in a while. Did you know now that she would couch things in a very gentle, loving, non-threatening way?
Did houses ever send in more money than was expected?
Oh, yes, but I mean, I wasn't privy to all of that.
You weren't privy
It
to
was
that.
just get whatever the determined amount
Having
was.
worked with Sister Bertha and Sister Cletus, did that follow you every place you went? You became the bursar?
Well, I think in some ways, yes, it did. Yeah. Especially when we opened St. Petersburg and St. Jude's St. Petersburg, because there were four of us, four sisters, and we
This is
opened
in
the school.
Florida?
And they, again, the three people that we worked with, our superior was Sister Anne Noreen Ryan, and she had been coming from Rosarian Academy. Sister had been teaching first grade for 1,000 years, and so anyhow, it was kind of up to each of us to do something. We started with 4 grades, and I had the senior grade, the 4th grade, and I was bursar and did some of the financial machinations, you might say.
How many years did you spend in Florida?
Oh, in Florida? Oh,
Or what other places
oh,
besides
I was
St.
at
Petersburg?
Rosarian. I was at St. Rose of Lima. I was at St. Joseph on the beach. So, I mean, I really I was there for many years. I never stopped to think how long.
How did
I was
you?
in Jacksonville, too.
Oh my! How did you get the call to go to California?
Well, that was an interesting thing. I was appointed, and I was at St. Rose of Lima in Miami Shores, had a delightful class, and I was working with some of the student teachers from Barry, because we were so close to Barry, if you know where
Yeah.
St. Rose is. And anyhow, Sister Lorena called me, and she said, "Oh, I'm so happy you're going to be coming up here." And I said, "Coming up where?" I said, "I don't think so." I talked with Mother Laura, and she said, "Everything is fine, da, da, da. Is there any reason you should be closer to home?" No. So anyhow, but she said, "Oh, you are going to be the principal at Our Lady of Mount Carmel in Whitcliffe." And this year is significant, and it certainly was. It was 1968.
Whitcliffe, Ohio.
Yes.
Yes.
And, it was, the changes that came. We came in the long habit. Before school started, most everybody were in short habits. There were 19 sisters, and it was the 5th largest school in the Diocese of Cleveland. So we had 1,300 children. It was like the zoo, because every place I had been, so much different. And there it was very difficult, but the changes were significant, and there were many from Detroit that wanted to come back and make significant strides with the Black community, and it just was different. School seemed not to be the significant focus of our lives at that point, and that was a surprise to me, because it seemed to have been a little bit slower getting down south.
The 1968, that would have been a result of Vatican II then.
Yeah.
Yes. Did any of the 19 sisters leave the congregation?
I think there were 6 that left.
6. Mm-hmm.
But they didn't leave, that year, but they left by the end of the year, or some were going, and making other plans. And we were discussing the things that we could do, which were not unreasonable, but they were unreasonable for school. For school and we all had every teacher had 55 children, and there were 4 and 5 classes of every grade. So on the staff, there were 52. To me, that was like an overwhelming avalanche.
You were probably waiting for some relief from that job.
Oh, indeed.
Huge.
Well, anyhow, subsequently, our pastor, I came back one summer. We had a trip, my family and I, and we went out west. And when we came back, our pastor Monsignor Andre, who was a remarkably wonderful, wonderful pastor, but very, very much steeped in the rigidity of where we had always been. And he didn't understand, and I didn't understand it either, but I'm not so sure those of us who lived through it did understand all of the vicissitudes of life at that point. You know, that one day you'd get up and the next day it would be different.
So fast.
It was very fast. I don't know how you could have done it differently, but anyhow, Monsignor had gotten a letter from the priest senate, and in the letter it said that the priest senate and whatever the other organizational aspects were had decided that all pastors that were over 70 were to retire immediately. And we had 4 assistants, and so some would have been delighted to have the parish. And so he was a broken man as a result of that. He was 74, I think. And he wasn't well. So subsequently he died. And the person who came as pastor afterwards had a problem. And it was very, very difficult, not only for the priests, but for everybody in the parish, you know.
So then you went from Wycliffe. I'm trying to get the...
But that was when we also got word that we could make a choice and go wherever we wanted.
Okay.
Well, it was just very reaffirming. I had several offers to go different places, and I thought, well, gee, I'd like to go to California. I haven't been to California. California sounds pretty good to me. And so Sister Laura Mary Pesic, who had been appointed superior when I was appointed principal, and we had both weathered the 6 years. We told Father that we would be leaving, and he nearly had a heart attack. But anyhow, I truthfully don't remember who they... Oh, I know. It was the assistant principal took the position. Mm-hmm. But anyhow...
so did you both go out west?
Yes, we went out west, and we went to a beautiful, beautiful place in the Bay Area, and were offered a position in a beautiful convent. It's just that when we talked, and we accepted the position, too, because we met with the council of the parish, but the pastor was real upset because, not upset really with us, he was thrilled we were coming, but his sister was the community that had withdrawn their sisters from that parish, and he took it quite personally that they abandoned him and abandoned his parish. He was very upset, and so he was, very vocal to us about how he felt about this and how communities can do these things. And we both thought over, well, if he's thinking like this, it's not going to be as meaningful to us. So we told Father that we'd like to, we didn't want to sign any commitment yet, but we would be in touch. And we did. But in the meantime, a friend of mine, Sister Clara Ann Budens, was principal and superior at St. Lawrence O'Toole in Oakland. And she said that one of their assistants was made pastor at a parish that was right down the street, right on High Street from St. Lawrence O'Toole. And she said, why don't you come and see, and I said, well, we just came back from California. I mean, how many people do you know put their suitcases down and go back to California? And so she said, well, think about it. And so Father called and he said, I want you to know everything is taken care of. And he said, I'll talk with you later. And he hung up. And the next thing, by special delivery, we got 2 tickets to fly to San Francisco. So we went. He was there with the sisters who were at St. Philip Neri. And the sisters were so thrilled that sisters might be coming. And we were treated, and I mean royally. He was lovely. The sisters, were heartbroken. They were Notre Dame sisters,
Oh.
and they, not from Cleveland, but from Burlingame. I'm not sure where they're from. Yeah, but anyhow, he was so good. He said, "I assure you," and I remember these terms. Sister and I looked at each other. "I assure you, if you decide to take this position," he said, "your welcome will not be warm and welcoming. It will be tumultuous." And I said, and Sister and I looked at each other and we said, "Well, if it's going to be tumultuous, we can't resist it." So anyhow, well, and that's the story. And I was there for 12 years, and it was meaningful. It was a wonderful place, a wonderful parish, and there were 320 children. So I was looking for the other 1,000 like we had at Our Lady of Mount Carmel. And in that whole experience, it was just a wonderful experience.
And Sister Laura Pesky has remained a friend throughout
Yeah,
these
she
years.
became the assistant principal, and she had to learn to do a lot of things, but it was so easy. Imagine how easy it would be if you had gone from 1,300 to 320, and just a beautiful place, but not all these buses. We had 17 buses in Cleveland when they'd come, and they'd peel off all. And it was overwhelming.
And then from California, you came back to Detroit. Is that correct?
Well, I know I came home for a while, and I stayed
Cleveland.
with my mother and my sister, and that worked out well. And then my mother was sick and in the hospital. And at that time, after I spent a year at in the pastoral program at Cleveland Clinic. We had a friend that worked that was in the Cleveland Clinic, and she had arranged it that I would, be in the pastoral program. And it was very, very interesting and very meaningful. I was the only woman in the group, and there was one priest and one nun, and then there were four other denomination men, and we all worked together well. It's just I wanted the floor that had cardiac, because heart is a big thing in our family. Everybody seems to have heart problems.
And you do too, don't you?
And I do too. But anyhow, I learned a lot, but it was also a learning experience that I did not like. Hospital work takes a unique person. And I found it very difficult to be in the chaplaincy program. And one night we had 7 expirations, and we only had in the whole hospital 2 babies, but one of them was a baby. And that really was a deciding factor to meet with people, which, you go through those experiences. But I knew that I did not want that as a position.
Mm-hmm.
So anyhow, I decided to, Sister Laura Mary's mother in the meantime had passed away, and Sister Laura Mary was in their family home and assisting her sister, who's her twin sister. And she's fine, but she has some problems that Sister had to take care of, or does take care of. And so then I decided I got a job in the public school. And I worked 5 years in the public school at teaching unwed mothers to get their high school diplomas.
Oh, beautiful.
And then from that, I worked, the program changed. And then I worked for the state, which was the Work First program. And the Work First program put people into positions to get jobs, but it was usually unwed mothers. So I had some of the students that I had
beautiful.
before. So, and then I had been in those 2 positions 10 years, and I had gotten ill. So when I got sick, it was kind of a problem. I had a back problem that preceded heart problem. But here
Well,
I am.
Your ministry to the unwed mothers, I mean, you are both teacher and mentor and guide, probably spiritual guide too, don't you believe?
Yes, yes. The thing that startled me about the program is that for the girls that I had, number one, they all had absolutely the most beautiful little babies. But what astonished me is that their mothers, the mothers of the unwed mothers,
Yes.
looked younger than their daughters.
Oh my God.
They were all far more current in their grooming and in everything they did. I found that a little bit disarming, but it was a good experience. But it's young people today don't seem to have the, I don't know, a solicitous support of all groups. Like, I went from home, which was, nurturing and safe and so forth, to, the congregation. So you're in groups with people that you love and learn from and that you can grow with. It's just that it's such a different situation.
Oh, in the world today,
Yes.
especially in the United
Yes,
States.
I thought the security
Mm-hmm.
of things that I never thought would be for young people. So anyhow, I think that's the story.
Yes. Was there a special woman, Adrian Dominican, along the way that you revered as a inspiration or?
Well, I think Sister Lorena was, and I certainly love Sister Aurelia. I had one experience in the summer when Sister was, we were both assigned to Pittsburgh, and I'd never been to that part of Pittsburgh, but Sister Aurelia and I were much more, I was close to her, living with her, and she was a remarkably deeply spiritual woman, and I just admired and loved her much. And her sister Lorena, too, whom I admired much and loved her. And she did everything right. I mean, and she was very close to Sister, who was our former superior? The one in charge of the congregation, the one who's over in Maria now.
Rosemary?
Rosemary Ferguson, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I learned much more to know her and for her relationship with Sister Lorena, which was admirable.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. One last thing.
Yes, dear.
What wisdom words would you have for someone who might be entering our congregation?
I think be responsive to the Holy Spirit. Be guided by the people whom you love and respect. And consider the direction that they suggest for you. I never thought, I wanted to enter when I was little, but I think that would be a normal thing. But as I grew older, that was not a choice of mine until I met our sisters, Sister Aurelia and Sister Lorena. And then I lived with some really quite remarkable women. I lived with Joanne O'Connor, who is here in Adrian at the moment. And what a wonderful example of religious life. And just in every way, I think we've been blessed. But my direction for anyone would be open to something new, something that might be more life-giving. And at different stages of your life, you're ready for different things. I mean, look how you change in things that go on. But I think good things.
Amen.
Amen.